Good morning, everyone. I am with Reyna Marder Ginta. Did I get it? Was I close?
Gentin, close.
Ginta. See, I told you, you know what, and I always say this, when you have my name too, you're bound to have to correct someone. And I do it out of love and respect and say, I'm sorry. But we're going to spend our lives, as my husband always says, spelling our names and then saying them. But welcome. You have an amazing, sort of interesting career that you have had. You live in Great Neck, New York, grew up in Great Neck, New York. You attended law school at Yale, no sloucher with us today. And you practice as an appellate attorney, excuse me, with the Public Defender's Office before turning to writing full time. Now, anyone who knows or is a mom of a law student currently knows that writing is so important, reading, of course, in law school. But you studied at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College, and your work is widely being published. Tell us about, I really want to ask you first, what made you take that turn? So that's the first question. And then I'm going to have you talk about, what you currently have published. So
Sure.
Welcome this morning.
Thanks so much. So, I've had the occasion to meet with a lot of young attorneys through having written these books now, and also some law students, and they all seem to have very strategic, not all, but a lot of people seem to have a much more strategic view of what their practice as an attorney is going to be like. And I'm always so amazed at that, because at the age, when I went to law school 30 years ago, I had no idea what kind of law I wanted to practice, what I wanted to do with myself. I figured out pretty early on that it was probably going to be something in the public interest. I didn't love the whole big corporate scene. That being said, the first job I took out of law school was at a big white shoe law firm in New York City. Many of my classmates were going that route. I was newly married. I needed, I wanted the income. I thought, my dad said, hey, maybe you'll like something that actually makes some money. And I thought, okay,
Isn't that what I think that's what our parents do when we've spent the money to have our kids go to law school. I can, if mine is listening, but I have one of those who wants to save the world, but.
Yeah, I think my parents were actually very proud of me and glad that in the end I did want to try to do something more, different. But at the time it seemed like something to try, and I did, and it wasn't for me at all. And pretty soon thereafter, I switched to more of a legal aid kind of job. And I did practice for almost 20 years doing either appellate work, or initially I was in the family court. So, I think you asked me what made me make that turn. And I guess what I would say is that it wasn't that I always wanted to be a writer. I mean, there were definitely people I knew. There was a woman in my first year law school class who really wanted to be an author. I'm not sure. I'm sure she was very talented and could have been a great lawyer also. But after first year, she dropped out. By the time we graduated, she had a published novel, and the rest of us were still doing our law thing. And I wasn't that woman. I did not feel I have to be a writer. This is what I want to do. I think I had a very good long run in the law. I still volunteer, and I think that there's so much to be said for it, and especially if you are doing something that you find meaningful. But I really, in about 2014, I kind of decided that I'd had enough. Kind of paid my dues, and I left my job without much of a sense of what I was going to do next, and then I just started exploring things, and it's really quite amazing. I was close to 50. I thought, wow, I'm in this fantastic position where I don't need to get a new job right away, and I can look around and see what else I might like to do with myself. And I kind of fell into the writing. A friend asked me if I wanted to take a class with her at Sarah Lawrence, which is a wonderful university pretty close to my house. And I went with her, and it kind of took off from there.
Through the writing class that you took, while you were taking it, I give you so much credit. Anybody who sort of goes back to the learning process, if it's a hobby or, you go into it for real, I mean, you dive in. And when you were sitting there, did you ever imagine this is my new sort of path or road? Or were you sitting there going, I'm interested in writing and this is kind of fun. And afterwards, I'll go have a glass of wine with my girlfriend. I mean,
I would say pretty much the latter. The class was actually a memoir class, which I thought was hilarious because I knew I wasn't going to write memoir. I didn't have that sort of legal career. I didn't really have that sort of life. When you think about memoir, you think Michelle Obama. I don't know. I don't know who you think of. That's who I think of. And I knew that wasn't me. But you
weren't thinking. I'm sure because you're humble enough to say like, I'm 50. Who's going to read about me? Let alone I'm going to write about me at that point. I mean,
and definitely I wasn't thinking I was going to write a whole memoir. But what ended up happening during that class was I wrote a number of small pieces that were, they were basically personal essays. They were things that you write about when you take memoir class. To be honest, people write about loss. People write about health. People write about identity. Very few times do people come in and say, this was the happiest day of my life. I'm going to write about that. It's just not that interesting. People write about the pain. People write about, the people that they miss. And I did a lot of that. I mean, my mother had passed away not too long before. I wrote a lot about my mother. I wrote about a friend who had passed away. And some of those pieces I ended up having published in different internet magazines on their own. And then some of them kind of formed the basis. I started to think, could I write a novel where some of these people my novel? I mean, I wasn't writing my story. I wasn't writing a true crime or a true whatever it was. But I was basing it very much, my first novel, on the job that I had for many years representing indigent people on felony appeal. And, I thought maybe the mom could have a little bit of my mom in the book. And there were a number of characters that kind of got formed out of those pieces.
Well, your first novel, Unreasonable Doubts, was named a finalist for the Women's Fiction Writers Association Star Award in 2019. And your first novel for children, My Name is Layla.
Layla, like the Clapton song.
I love that. Was published in January 2021. And then you have a third novel, Both Are True, is coming out this fall. So you have not wasted any time. That's to have three in that short period of time. Someone might say COVID's been kind to you in the last year and a half, but no one would really come out and say that. But when you sit down, how do you develop your characters? What's your method, or how do you get?
The first book, as I say, really kind of grew out of experiences that I had had. It was it took place in an office that was very much like the office that I worked in. The protagonist was not me, but certainly bore resemblance to me. So that, in some ways was easier for me to write. It was also fueled by a lot of emotion, having just left the job and having hit this point in my life where I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing with myself. It had a lot kind of going into it. The second book was a children's book, and that was completely different.
I mean, that's just jumping way over a different bridge.
Ship. You know what? But it was great. I mean, it's actually a middle grade book, so it's sort of ages 10 and up as how it's being marketed. And that really came a lot more from my imagination, and it involved doing not heavy research, but it's about a girl that has undiagnosed dyslexia, and so I did kind of need to understand dyslexia certainly better than I did before going into it. And I wanted it to be relatable and representative, and people, I think it's great to have a protagonist that audience can feel is their own. And I think it's a great book for kids generally. Of course, it's my book, so I think so. But but, I did want people that have reading challenges not to read it and say, what's she talking about? She doesn't
Right.
get at all what it's like.
Mhm.
So, some of it is more general. It's about bullying. It's about empathy. It's about figuring out how to get your needs known to your teachers and the adults around you. So, those are things that we can all relate to. But the specific dyslexia stuff, I had to kind of research a little bit.
Mhm.
And the third book is actually close to my heart. It's the protagonist. There's two protagonists. The female protagonist is a family court judge, and I did start my career working in family court as a law guardian, and I also now volunteer in family court on domestic violence cases. So that milieu of family court, if you've ever been there either for yourself or for some other reason, it's a crazy, intense, emotional place. I mean, the things that go on there, the
Mhm.
stories that get told, the emotions that get bared in front of total strangers who are your judge,
Yeah.
your attorney. And it's amazing stuff. So the book kind of deals with quite a bit of that. The male protagonist is a internet blogger and aspiring novelist, so he kind of has his own set of issues that I'm also familiar with. So it's fun. It's not fun. It's not a fun book, but it's an interesting book.
The characters really come off that. It sounds like the characters really, and I think that makes it the best writers that I've talked to, when those characters really come authentically, from people or bits of your life. Are you working with a publishing house through this process and everything?
So I am. I actually, these are 3 books, and they all were published by 3 different publishers, which probably looks a little odd, but if you're my age and just getting into this and you don't have a tremendous social media platform, which I don't, it's hard. It's hard to get published. And the thing that I like about having done it this way, honestly, is that I've met a tremendous number of interesting people. I feel like I understand how to work with different kinds of people. And I think I've proven to myself and to other people who might be interested in doing something like this, that there are all sorts of ways to get your book out there if you want to be a published author. It doesn't all have to be, you got this agent and they sold your book to a big 5 publishing house.
Yes.
Would that be a fantasy? Of course. Of course, I'd like my next book to be published by Simon & Schuster. Okay, but it's not the only way to get your book out there. And if that's not your number one concern, then to me, this has really been fabulous. I've been with one hybrid press, which is a little bit different model. That was my first book. And then the other 2 books are being published by small presses, independent presses.
Well, and I ask this question because I like people to learn when I talk to people. And I mean, that's, my goal in sharing your story. And I think it's really important. I have good friends who work for HarperCollins and Penguin, and they'll tell you how hard it is to be in that, sphere. But there are ways to get your book published, and as a publicist, people think it's hard to get your book publicized, and it's not. And I appreciate your drive to knowing that this was your goal, and there are ways to do it, and there's lots of ways to do it now. There, even in the traditional sense of a publishing house, there are a variety of publishing houses.
Sure.
So, good for you in that sense, because I think those who sit around waiting for the very select big are going to sit around for a long time. And, people still do like to read books.
Of course. Listen, depending on the stage you're at in your career, if I were a 25-year-old graduating from an MFA program with a lot of talent and a lot of, feeling like this was going to be my life's work, I would maybe take a different route. But, that's not where I'm at in my own life. And, as you say, waiting around, it just seems foolish to me.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited. Your 3rd book will be out this fall. The biggest question I have, because they all just sound so incredibly interesting, and I love that there's different target audiences. Where do people find your books and, to get their hands on them? It sounds like really great summer reading, which, comes up all the time. My husband, we were sitting in the backyard yesterday and he said, "Oh, I'm rereading a book." And I said, "Really?" And he's like, I can't seem to nail what I want to read. And I'm like, I think one of the problems truly is a lot of bookstores have gone away. And people like to put their hands on a book, but he's like, "Yeah, I just can't figure out what I want to read this summer." So please share how to find your
Oh, I
books.
mean, that would be my big pitch, is to visit your local indie bookstore.
Mhm.
The pandemic has been tremendously painful for them. There's been no
Yes.
traffic. That's what they rely on, people wandering in. And, now it's picking up, of course, but for a year and a half, there was really nothing. So if you
Yeah.
can go into your local indie bookstore, is my book going to be on the table? No, you will have to ask them to order it. But if you don't want to go into your local indie bookstore, you can certainly order on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, and maybe check out bookshop.org, which is, it's like a conglomerate that puts together all the indie bookstores, and it can order from any.
I love that. It doesn't, not only locally do I love to go into a bookstore, but, I was telling you offline, my daughter lives in New York and we were just recently visiting and we were so excited. We walked through a couple bookstores in New York that were back open. We just love to walk into a bookstore. There is nothing better than the smell and to touch, books and look at them. And unfortunately, so many independent and even the big bookstores, have gone away. So it is one of those things I say, definitely support your local bookstores. Some of the big bookstores, but I'm so excited to have spent this time with you. Do you want to give out your website as well, which I put on? It is on the link to this interview today.
Okay, great. It's just, I would have to spell it for you, but it's just ReynaMarderGentin.com. I don't want to.
So easy when people use their names.
Yeah.
So if you want to get more information, Reyna's email, her website is right in our link today. I'm so excited to have met you. I can't wait to, maybe you'll come back in the fall. We can talk more about this third novel. I'm sure by then you'll have the fourth and fifth going. But keep us posted on everything you're doing in the future novels that you have coming out. I always want to hear more.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's been great.
All right. Have a great summer and keep promoting the book.
Thanks.
All right. Have a great day.